Oh man. Okay, yeah, that's wild turkey right there. That is, woo! Hey folks, David Thomas Tao with Vine Pair, and I am coming to you from the office today with a fresh crack. I mean, we are opening this bottle live on camera. It's not live, it's pre-recorded. Russell's 15 is here. Russell's Reserve 15-year bourbon. A couple things to keep in mind. This is going to replace, just for 2024, the 13-year version of Russell's Reserve bourbon. So there's no Russell's 13 this year, just Russell's 15. And Wild Turkey has said that this is intended as a one-off. So like, we won't necessarily be getting another Russell's 15. It's not guaranteed. So enjoy it while you can. Woo, fresh crack. Okay, MSRP on this, $250, which is actually interesting to me. So it's not cheap. Don't get me wrong, this is not a cheap whiskey, but it's cheaper than their single rickhouse expressions, which I've also reviewed for Vine Pair, and I think tend to be really fantastic. 117.2 proof, which is not quite cask strength. That's actually a proof point that Eddie Russell and his team determined was correct for this batch, but just so you know, it's not quite cask strength after all of these barrels were dumped in batch, so just something to keep in mind. Oh man. Okay, yeah, that's wild turkey right there. That is dark molasses, leather, damp tobacco. Oh, it's powerfully tannic. There's something woody here too. There's plenty of oak, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of oak on this 15-year bourbon. It's a little bit like being in library stacks. I like it. You know that kind of like library book smell? Like if you're in an old library deep in the stacks? There's a little bit of that. I kind of dig it actually. So you take that dark molasses, you take that tobacco, that leather, that like damp tobacco, you add in a little bit of like old book. That's kind of what you get immediately here. Now that leather, it peels back after a little bit and you get spearmint. Interesting, it's very interesting. So when I nose a lot of Russell's 13 batches, and they are different from year to year, they are different from batch to batch, I get a lot of orange on the nose and I get a lot of orange peel on the nose. That's dialed way back here. I get some dark cherry. You nose this and the first thing you think is like, this is some old bourbon. This is some thick old bourbon. The longer this sits, this has like an interesting lemongrass note on it. It took me like probably 15 minutes to figure out what I was smelling there at the end, and it's lemongrass. Kind of fun. All right, let's try it out. Look, I'm gonna go into detail here. I'm gonna give you my in-depth tasting notes, but I'm just also gonna give you a spoiler alert. This is really good. This is really good whiskey. Like on the nose and on first sip, you know this is something special. Oak and Luxardo cherry and cinnamon and clove. I'm just like naming things that are parts of the bourbon flavor wheel, but this hits a lot of the blood orange. Ooh, that kind of comes in toward the end of the palate. Again, something I get on Russell's 13, especially on the nose, certain batches, I get a pretty heavy orange peel component, maybe even burnt orange peel. This, I didn't get it so much on the nose, but it's there on the palate. It's acting its age and maybe then some. If you told me this was like an 18-year bourbon, I would have believed you, especially based on the color, although that's kind of a false equivalency. There's a lot of oak here, but it's not over oaked, okay? This brings the full force of oak sugars and darker elements and tannic elements, but it finds ways to balance those out via a little bit of that mint, a little bit of that lemongrass comes through on the palate as well, some blood orange, Luxardo cherry, a chocolate note, spice, clove. There's a big umami flavor. There's a big umami component. It's almost like you take, and I've actually had this at a restaurant once, I know it sounds super weird. They dry mushrooms and they make a dust out of them and they sprinkle that on top of something, like on top of a dessert to add a little bit of savoriness. All right, I gotta say on the finish, the oak drops off pretty quick and it gets sweeter. The sweetness accumulates and there's a really pronounced chocolate element here on the finish. So as that oak dies away, the finish continues on, but it's like a semi-sweet baking chocolate that continues on with maybe a little bit of cinnamon. All right, Russell's Reserve 15-year-old bourbon. I give this 97 points. Fantastic work to the Russell's team, to the Wild Turkey team. This is Wild Turkey near the peak of their powers. If I see this on the shelf for 250 bucks, I'm probably grabbing another one. If you are able to find a bottle or if you have a friend who has a bottle, I hope you get to enjoy. And I wanna know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Russell's 15? Did you find it superior to, inferior to, or about the same level as Russell's 13? Let me know. Let's chat in the comments. Let's make it a discussion. Until then, I'm David Thomas Tao. Cheers.